So last week, if you were here, you might remember that I wore a Buffalo Bills t-shirt to mark the beginning of the football season. The t-shirt was a gift from my brother that said BILL-IEVE, like BILLIEVE, because I'm a pastor, which means that I don't get normal gifts. Well, last Sunday evening, my favorite team was losing by a lot. Down 15 points with 4 minutes left in the game, fans leaving the stadium. I stopped watching, started watching something else. My brother in New York, who is a bigger fan than anybody I know, went to bed. Because their statistical chance of winning was basically 0.9%. Meaning that their chances of losing was 99.1%. Hopeless. Completely hopeless. But then, the Bills scored off of a tipped pass. Then the Ravens, the team they were playing, fumbled. Then the Bills scored again. And then they stopped the Ravens again. 2 more big plays, and the kicker, the smallest player on the field, a guy who just joined the team 3 days previously, rushes out onto the field with time running down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The kick is up. And the Bills won by 1 point. The mascot, Billy Buffalo, rushed out onto the field. The stadium was going crazy. And my phone started blowing up because remember, I'm watching something else. And my phone starts buzzing with messages from family and friends and even a rabbi. Wow, wild, crazy. What a start to the season. Whew. Now, for those of you who don't care about football, including my wife, the Bills' quarterback is Josh Allen, who just married a movie star, Haley Steinfeld, who was in the Pitch Perfect movies and Marvel's Hawkeye, and recently a movie titled Sinners, which sounds very religious. So this movie star's husband says after the game about our fans leaving the stadium before the end of the game, he said, are you ready? The next time, have a little faith. Even though I had worn the Buffalo BILL-IEVE t-shirt that morning to church of all places, I still didn't believe. But now, after all of that, the miraculous win, the BILL-IEVE t-shirt, the sinner's actress's husband saying, have a little faith, I'm starting to wonder, does this mean something? Is this the year that the Bills will finally win the Super Bowl? After a lifetime of disappointment, is God finally going to be on our side? I hope so. I hope the Bills win. But no, these religiously sounding connections to football should not be understood as a prophetic prediction of future events, as much as I would like them to be so. And in the same way, we've just started reading through the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation, all the signs and symbols and weird images should not be read as predictions of future events, especially predictions about the end of the world. As I mentioned last week, the book of Revelation, or the word apocalypse, means to reveal, and it's about revealing Jesus, who is inviting us to follow his way of love. And so when it comes to the symbols and strange images, we first have to consider what they all meant 2,000 years ago before we can sort of start to figure out how they might mean something for us today. All right? So Revelation chapters 2 and 3 is a series of letters written to 7 churches in modern-day Turkey. With the first letter starting, to the angel of the church of Ephesus, write, These are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his hands, who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. The last letter concludes with listen, with Jesus saying, "Listen, I am standing at the door knocking. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come in and eat with you and you with me." Clear enough? So the 7 lampstands are defined previously as the 7 churches whom John is writing to. But 7 is also a symbol for the whole, like the 7 days of creation. So what's written to them is also for us. This means that just as Jesus is present walking among the 7 churches, Jesus is with us. The 7 stars is more political in nature. And we talked about this last week, about how the book of Revelation is political, if we're honest, and how we wrestle with that. So these stars were often used in art and in political propaganda by the Roman Empire and by other empires to symbolize or portray a sense of universal power and control that comes from the will of the gods. So for Jesus to be holding 7 stars, this image is an anti-empire image, stating that the universe is in God's hands, not Caesar's. We are in the caring hands of Jesus, not the controlling hands of the great economic and military superpowers of the world. Okay? Having said all of that, we should also note that even in Revelation, John, the author, doesn't seem to notice how frequently the way of empire seeps into his understanding of Jesus and the image of Jesus that we see. For example, John is influenced in these letters by the culture of the gymnasium, the training grounds for athletes and warriors in the ancient world. So, starting out talking about the Buffalo Bills wasn't completely off base. Sports have informed John's writing as well. Unfortunately, the environment of the gymnasium in the ancient world was very, very exclusive, with clearly defined rules about who belonged and who did not. Specifically, male citizens of Rome belonged. Not women, not slaves, not outsiders, not people who became citizens later on, not people who were viewed as lazy or immoral or different from what seemed normal. And these strict boundaries were enforced and maintained in the gymnasium through rewards and punishments. So, what we see in these letters to the churches is a strict view of who belongs in the church and who does not. And these dividing walls are maintained through rewards and punishments. So, repeated in all 7 letters, John writes, "To the victor, the one who conquers, or to those who win, you will be rewarded." And there's a list of different types of rewards. For example, you'll eat from the tree of life, or you'll have power to rule over the nations, which is strange when we think about Jesus in the Gospels saying that we don't rule over people like the other nations and emperors do. Instead, we serve. For the enemy, then, those who are not faithful, those who do not believe, those who don't follow the rules, there comes punishment. And by punishment, I don't just mean natural consequences, I mean threats of violence and exclusion. It's really confusing. If you read through these 2 chapters, because John is using symbols and images of a merciful, nonviolent Jesus who conquers with love, not with weapons. And then at the same time, there is all this stuff seeping in from Greco-Roman sport and military training that includes threats and rewards to rule over people. Threats of violence and exclusion. Are you confused by this? I'm confused by it. Now, there's a good chance that I'm missing something. I mean, we're 2,000 years removed from all of this, so there's a good chance that there's a certainty that I don't know everything that's happening. Perhaps these churches needed to be more careful and exclusive simply for their own safety. That's possible, since they were a small, vulnerable community that was sometimes persecuted. And later in the book of Revelation, we'll see John turning the language of conquering or being victorious upside down in a meaningful way, I think. But even with all of that, we have to be honest that the violence and exclusive parts of Revelation have not aged well at all. These letters have been used and are still used to cause harm, and we have to be honest. There are groups in the letter to Smyrna and Philadelphia that it's a group that is called the synagogue of Satan, which, as you can imagine, has been used to promote anti-Jewish hate and violence. In the letter to Thyatira, the enemy is portrayed as the evil prostitute Jezebel. And this image has often been used and is used to promote or to justify sexism or even violence towards women and people who are gender non-conforming. It doesn't matter if John intended this or not. As Christians who claim this book as a part of our sacred text and as a part of our faith, it is on us to condemn this kind of violence, this kind of exclusion, and this kind of language. Amidst a consistent plague of violence in our schools and in politics and in wars around the world, we must join any chorus, small or large, saying that violence and exclusion in word or action is not the answer. It doesn't solve anything. So let me put it this way. I've read way too many books about the book of Revelation for my own good. And the most common approaches to reading the book of Revelation and the Bible in general includes embracing violence as justified, ignoring violence as if it's not important, and last, focusing on the parts that turn the language of violence and exclusion upside down. And of course, then there are those who just use this as an example for why religion is terrible and nobody should believe anything. So there's that option as well, I guess. So I prefer the subverting violence approach to reading the Bible. But honestly, I'm not entirely satisfied with that either. Because it doesn't force us to be challenged by how easily the way of empire can take root in us and in our faith. This is why I think it's important to honor our sacred text as more honest than any of us really want it to be. Yes, of course, we have all the ways that God's love and grace can bring hope and healing. But if we're honest, enshrined in our sacred text is also these many reminders of how easily we can project our own violence and desire to exclude onto God. Perhaps we do this as a way of justifying our own desire to win or to control others. Maybe we do it intentionally or unintentionally. Perhaps we do it as a way of coping with our own experiences of hurt and pain. But when I'm honest about the stuff of empire seeping into our image of Jesus, and the way that that's done in the Bible as well, I'm forced to confess and confront not just the way that it exists in America or around the world or within Christianity in general, but I'm forced to confront the ways that I am a walking contradiction. I want to follow Jesus and his way of love, and sometimes I want to get my way as easily and as quickly as possible, regardless of who is hurt. So when it comes to the Bible, what I'm saying is that I believe, and genuinely, I believe that there is more truth for us to wrestle with in an imperfect Bible and with an imperfect faith than with a perfect Bible and an unquestioning faith. I don't think we need to be anxious about some of the stuff that we find in the Bible, entirely anxious. If you are, I hope you would talk to me, because I understand. I've spent most of my life being anxious about some of this stuff, but there is an incredible amount of freedom when we allow the Bible to be what it is, inspired by God and very human. So, when I look at the world, you guys okay? When I look at the world, when I think about the political environment that we live in, the state of Christianity in the United States and in other places, I don't always feel very hopeful. Statistically, there are days when I'm putting the chances of love winning at about 0.9%. But then I keep coming back to Jesus holding the 7 stars, challenging the ways of greed and injustice in our world, and, if I'm honest, in me. And I keep coming back to Jesus walking among the lampstands, still present with us in such a way that allows us to be light, shining into the darkness. And I keep coming back to Jesus knocking at the door, inviting us to listen, inviting us to gather together as a community around a table, around a meal, to be nourished and to be refreshed, energized to change the world. So even in the darkest moments, you'll be glad to know this as your pastor, I still believe, as of today, the victory, real victory, looks and feels and even tastes like love. That's what I hold on to, even as I struggle with how I am and how the world is. Victory looks, feels, and tastes like love. And one of the ways that we say as a congregation, I agree, or I sort of agree, or I hope that that's true, is to say, amen. So all of God's people said, amen. Or most of God's people said, amen.